Chapter 2765 Huai Jian has become a heavenly venerate. Chapter 2765 Huai Jian has become a heavenly venerate. 2765 Huai Jian has become a heavenly venerate. The foreign realm, a very familiar place. In the past, compelled by the heavenly venerates of the two realms, Ling Han had had no choice but to take risks by fleeing here. He had also experienced a hot-blooded youth here that was filled with battle. After more than an epoch, he had returned once more. But this time, he was already a pseudo-heavenly venerate, and his true strength had probably reached the third tier. He could sweep aside all and any opposition here. Let's go to the core of the dimension first. Compared with seeking out those elites of the foreign realm and taking revenge, Ling Han's priority now was naturally to take hold of the core of the dimension first. When he claimed all the powers of dimension, who knew, Ling Han might be able to comprehend the profound secrets of how the Genesis world gave rise to dimensions, and from there become capable of producing power of dimension within his own body. Because this was the foreign realm, they also took note of a matter that was widely spread as they traveled. Huai Jian was presently breaking through to the heavenly venerable tier. Huai Jian. Ling Han was dazed for a moment before realization dawned on him. Huai Jian was the most outstanding prodigy of the foreign realm from an epoch ago. At the time, Ling Han could fight him to a stalemate. He had not thought that Huai Jian was about to become a heavenly venerate after an epoch. Ling Han felt very rueful. The people that he knew all had extremely great improvement. Of course, to say nothing of the fact that Huai Jian had not become a heavenly venerate, even if he had reached the limits of this dimension, Ling Han would have been able to suppress him single-handedly. While a pseudo-heavenly venerate, he was unbelievably powerful. Not too many years later, they arrived at the location of the core here. Originally, the core of a dimension could not be approached. This was the true power of heaven and earth. Once one approached it, they would be strongly rebounded by the power of this dimension. This might far surpass regulations. However, Ling Han presently already possessed third tier's strength, and this was the core of a low-level dimension, so compared with Ling Han, it was actually outmatched. If Ling Han unleashed his full power, he could even burst this core of the dimension. He naturally would not do that. Instead, he stretched out a hand, and stuck his hand directly into the core of the dimension, forcefully extracting the power of this dimension. In other places, he would only be seated nearby, comprehending the power of the dimension, but now that the balance of strength was inclined towards him instead, there was no need to go to so much trouble. He could just simply extract it. It was simple and domineering. The core of the dimension trembled, seemingly afraid that Ling Han would burst it, yet it did not dare to fight back at all. Ling Han soon completed the process, and one of the cells inside his body condensed the power of this dimension. In the future, this process would repeat endlessly. This was really overwhelmingly fast. They left the core, and saw the entire foreign realm was in a state of excitement. The reason for this was very simple. Huai Jian had successfully broken through to the heavenly venerable tier, and the foreign realm had gained another supreme elite. Shall we go and take a look? The women were all very curious. This was a prodigy that had been able to become their husband's equal, and now he had also broken through to the heavenly venerable tier. Sure. Ling Han nodded. He, too, wanted to know if the foreign realm had broken the agreement, and begun an invasion against the celestial realm again. Because the news of Huai Jian breaking through to the heavenly venerable tier caused a great commotion, it was very easy to investigate his whereabouts. Who would imagine that anyone would dare to make a move on Huai Jian? You all. The person that they asked looked at Ling Han and his group, and then shook his head. Young man, you guys wanting to admire an elite is understandable, but what cultivation level are you in? Are you guys even qualified to go? At present, Ling Han and company had disguised themselves as beings of the foreign realm, and with their strength, there was completely no worry that anyone would see through their disguises. Ling Han naturally would not drop to his level, and merely responded with a smile. When they had gotten their answers, Ling Han and company set out, heading towards the Mountain of 10,000 Swords. The Mountain of 10,000 Swords was where Huai Jian had gone into seclusion to break through to the heavenly venerable tier. In the past, it was not called the Mountain of 10,000 Swords, but when Huai-Jian was comprehending Tao, thousands and thousands of sword projections appeared on the mountain. When those who cultivated sword Tao saw this, they experienced boundless enlightenment. Hence, this mountain had also been renamed as Mountain of 10,000 Swords. From then onwards, it had also become a sacred land of the foreign realm. At the foot of the Mountain of 10,000 Swords, there was a sea of people. Everyone was fighting to catch a glimpse of the newly promoted Heavenly Venerate. The latter was a living legend, and also the only person who had become a Heavenly Venerate in the latest epoch. Sigh, if there had not been a demon king that had barged in here in the past, perhaps it would not just have been Lord Huai-Jian alone who would have broken through to the Heavenly Venerable tier, someone suddenly said ruefully. Lord Liu, what does that mean? Someone beside him asked. The man from before shook his head. In the past, there had been quite a number of prodigies that were Lord Huai-Jian's equal. Even if they were inferior, they were not too far off from him, either. But a spy from the celestial realm hid himself under the wings of Lord Desolate Eternity. When he was exposed, he actually killed those prodigies, and only Lord Huai-Jian was spared. What? The people in the area all exclaimed. This was secret knowledge that they were unaware of. Ling Han just happened to be nearby, and couldn't help but feel startled for a moment. Wasn't he the one that was being talked about now? He had not thought that there would actually be people that would still remember him even after so many years. The speaker merely smiled, and did not proceed to make explanations for what had happened in the past. However, those people in the vicinity all began to curse Ling Han. Some said that he was underhanded, and there were some that said he was treacherous. The foreign realm had treated him so well, yet he had still not come to his senses. Ling Han was unconcerned, but the women all looked furious. Shui Yenyu was the first to move. Peng! A gust of power rippled out. Pa, pa, pa! Some of the people around instantly collapsed. Though she was only a first heaven celestial king, and not a strong one at that, the people around her were only at the ascending origin tier at best, so how could they possibly withstand her power? This commotion was too great, and it immediately led to observation on an even greater scale. People were all confused. Why had a fight suddenly broken out here? But everyone knew that with how strong Shui Yenyu was, she had to be a 10th Lotus elite at the very least, so how many people would dare to interfere in her matters? Humph, this is the sacred land where Lord Huai-Jian has attained Tao. Today, there are even a considerable number of Lord Heavenly Venerates that have come to offer congratulations. Who dares to be insolent here? Someone reprimanded. He was a red-haired man, and his right arm was the complete form of a scorpion's pincer. He had the confidence to reprimand her because he was a 13th Lotus elite. It's me, so what about it? Shui Yenyu countered. The red-haired man glanced a while longer at Shui Yenyu, humphed, and then said, kneel down immediately, and beg for forgiveness in the direction of the summit. I can spare you this once. He could tell with a glance that Shui Yenyu's cultivation level was only at the 10th Lotus, and the gap between the two of them was boundless. Shui Yenyu naturally would not agree. She scoffed, if you kneel down and apologize to me, I will spare you just this once. How dare you? When the red-haired man saw that Shui Yenyu actually dared to mimic him, he immediately shouted loudly. With a wave of his hand, he grabbed out at Shui Yenyu. The scorpion pincers grew exponentially in size, with iridescent light wrapped around it, exuding the great might of regulations of the great Tao. A puny 10th Lotus actually dared to talk back to him. She truly had to be tired of living. Bewitching Maiden Ru gave a soft shout, and sent out a palm strike. Peng! The red-haired man was immediately sent flying, a mist of green-colored blood gushing out of him. She was a 9th heaven celestial king. Though it was impossible for her to further advance to the heavenly venerable tier, her battle prowess naturally was not something that the red-haired man could match. Peng! 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 The red-haired man was struck flying, and his body crashed into all the obstacles blocking his way, destroying a considerable number of mountain rocks before finally sinking into the mountain, no longer visible. Everyone paled in shock, and then felt outraged. This was the Mountain of 10,000 Swords, where Lord Huai-Jian had attained Tao, and would be one of the sacred lands of the future, yet what was it now? Lord Huaijian had not even officially established his own faction, and his mountain was already damaged, though it was not very serious. This was a grave act of blasphemy. Chapter 2766, 2766 Tea Serving Maid. Chapter 2766, 2766 Tea Serving Maid. 2766 Tea Serving Maid. What great insolence! Everyone whispered among themselves. Most of the cultivators of the foreign realm tended to be fiercer than the people of the celestial realm. They all set their eyes on Ling Han and company, looking menacing. Lord Huaijian has broken through to the heavenly venerable tier, and this is a matter that should be celebrated by all, yet you people actually dare to come and cause trouble? Don't think that you are invincible just because you are an 18th lotus. Some people stepped out, sneering. It was not just one. In the blink of an eye, 7 18th lotus elites had appeared, surrounding Ling Han and the others. The pride and authority of a heavenly venerate could not permit offense. Surrender, and don't resist arrest, an 18th lotus elite demanded. With his insight, he naturally could tell with a glance that only bewitching Maiden Ru had attained the 18th lotus out of this whole group. The others were only in the 10th lotus. In fact, there were 2 of them that had not even reached the 10th lotus. That naturally was Ling Han and the Empress. That was because one of them was a pseudo-heavenly venerate, while the other was a first-tier heavenly venerate. They had both left the range of Celestial King tier, and returned to the basics one. Bewitching Maiden Ru crossed her arms. Come battle me, then. She took the initiative to charge out. Shua. A whip appeared in her grip, and she lashed out at the 7 great 18th lotus elites. This whip was a celestial tool which Ling Han had made for her. After so many years had passed, the amount of divine metal in Ling Han's possession was also astonishing. There was enough to allow the women to not only have one each, but in fact, what they were wearing could also be made from divine metal, having high stats in both attack and defense. Thus, the bewitching Maiden Ru charged out without any fear. To say the least, even if she did not have this whole set, wasn't there still Ling Han and the Empress backing her up? Ancestral weapon. These 18th lotus elites all humphed, and they summoned their own celestial tools as well. Having reached a level equivalent to the 9th heaven, how could they possibly have been unable to gain a celestial tool? Ding, ding, dang, dang. The 8 of them fought intensely. Being able to advance to the 9th heaven, especially in a low-level dimension, all of them were definitely supreme prodigies, so not only did the bewitching Maiden Ru not get the upper hand, she was being suppressed instead. However, these 18th lotus elites very soon discovered, much to their dismay, that their opponent actually had another celestial tool as armor on her, and there were extremely high-level seals flickering on it at that. It possessed astonishingly strong defense. These were seals that Ling Han had inscribed. They possessed a portion of the might of the indestructible heaven scroll, and combined with the power of divine metal, even a 9th heaven celestial king could not penetrate this defense. The disadvantage was that these seals weren't permanent. Once in a while, they would have to be drawn anew. If this was another heavenly venerate, who would do such a thing? Wasn't it too troublesome? But Ling Han was unconcerned. If not spending time on his wife, then what would he be spending time on? Bewitching Maiden Ru did not have to worry about defense at all. She only had to continuously attack. This gave her too much of an advantage. She only had to attack and forget defense entirely, which was extremely impressive. However, though the 7 great 18th lotus elites could not capture the bewitching Maiden Ru, it was no issue for them to ensure their own safety. After all, their battle prowess was not inferior to the bewitching Maiden Ru's, what more when the 7 of them were all working together. As bewitching Maiden Ru gave a soft shout, lightning flickered on her body. Z. Very quickly, 9-colored divine light condensed on the body of the whip. 5 elements lightning technique. This was a heavenly venerate technique, and she could only use it a few times. This was still due to the fact that she had the protection of the precious suit of armor she was wearing, so she could sustain attacks head-on. Otherwise, she would not dare to gather power for a powerful move while she was being ganged up on by 7 great elites, either. But once the powerful move was used, her battle prowess also soared high with a crackle. Peng, 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 peng. Wherever the whip swept past, its power could not be matched. So what if there were 7 great elites? In an instant, they were all in shambles, none of them daring to face the whip's power head-on. This was a heavenly venerate technique, and with how difficult it was to pass on, even a 9th heaven celestial king could not possibly learn it, if he did not have a heavenly venerate for a master or father. The spectators were all dumbfounded. The 7 supreme elites were actually unable to subdue this woman. Heavens, could it be that she was a pseudo-heavenly venerate? Step back. A feminine voice filled with authority rang out, allowing no refusal. The 7 great elites all held their breaths, and stepped aside. A woman walked out from the mountains. She was treading on air as she came towards them. There was no iridescent light wrapped around her, but she exuded an air that would cause one to tremble. She was of the angel race, with 2 massive white wings sprouting from her back. She had a golden halo above her head, and was astonishingly beautiful. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed slightly. This was an old friend, Jing Zhongyue. When he had used the power of the Black Tower to begin a massacre at the Divine Desolate Mountain, only Huai Jian and Jing Zhongyue possessed precious tools protecting them because they were favored by the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity, and thus managed to escape. After so many years, Huai Jian had become a heavenly venerate, and this woman had actually become a pseudo-heavenly venerate as well. Greetings, milady. The 7 great elites all knelt, paying their respects to Jing Zhongyue. There were some among them who were even a good number of times older than Jing Zhongyue, but age was never a factor on the path of cultivation. The only things that mattered were cultivation level and strength. Jing Zhongyue nodded. With her feet bare and snow-white skin, she exuded an air of purity. Even if the demon race hated the angel race, they had to admit that she was a beauty that would enchant even them. Jing Zhongyue glanced at bewitching Maiden Ru, and coldly demanded, "Who are you?" Bewitching Maiden Ru chuckled, and said, "Little girl, you are quite pretty. How about becoming a tea-serving maid for my husband?" Upon hearing this, a wave of commotion spread through the crowd. Insolent, this was too insolent. To actually dare ask a pseudo-heavenly venerate to become a maid. Whether it was to serve tea or warm the bed, it was still a great insult. In the entire world, the heavenly venerable tier was the strongest. Who could insult a heavenly venerate? Everyone was outraged, wanting nothing more than to tear Ling Han to pieces. When Ling Han saw how everyone's eyes were focused on him, he couldn't help but exclaim about his innocence mentally. It was not he who said this, so why were they targeting him? Jing Zhongyue was also cold. Initially, I only wanted to pass a light punishment on you, seeing as it was not easy for you to attain the 18th lotus, but you insist on courting your own death. She moved, and grabbed out at the bewitching Maiden Ru. It was naturally impossible that bewitching Maiden Ru would be a worthy match for a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Thus, she hurriedly called out, "Sister Luan Xing, help!" Peng. The Empress moved, and Jing Zhongyue was very casually sent flying with a wave of the former's jade-like palm, breaking through countless mountain rocks on her course, and finally sinking into the body of the mountain of 10,000 swords. The Empress' hand was much heavier than the bewitching Maiden Ru's, and Jing Zhongyue, as a pseudo-heavenly venerate, could withstand the impact too, so she directly created a hole with the collision that she had with the mountain of 10,000 swords. Everyone was rendered speechless. This was actually a heavenly venerate. It was said that a heavenly venerate could not be insulted. Then since dirty water could not be poured on Huai Jian, how could this one condone the same thing? You people wish to capture those close to her and punish them at the slightest provocation. What position did that place the pride and authority of this heavenly venerate? When has such a powerful friend appeared in our dimension? Amidst laughter, a considerable number of figures shot downwards from the mountain of 10,000 swords. When everyone saw this, they hurriedly bowed in greeting. Greetings, heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity. Greetings, heavenly venerate Kai Yang. Greetings, heavenly venerate Yellow Spring. Greetings, heavenly venerate Huai Jian. 4 heavenly venerates had appeared together. This party was too powerful. Any single one of them possessed strength capable of conquering the whole world. The 4 great heavenly venerates all stood with their arms crossed behind their backs, while their eyes were set upon the Empress. The Empress could not be bothered to maintain the disguise, and immediately revealed her true appearance. What? This is actually a human girl. Hasn't the celestial realm long since called a ceasefire with us? Why has a heavenly venerate suddenly come here? This is probably a newly promoted one. It is said that there are already no heavenly venerates standing guard over at the celestial realm. Everyone exclaimed in shock, feeling extremely flabbergasted. Who exactly are you? Huai Jian demanded. After his advance to the heavenly venerable tier, his aura had become increasingly steady and stable. Chapter 2767, 2767 Shout that caused heaven's might to retreat. Chapter 2767, 2767 Shout that caused heaven's might to retreat. 2767 Shout that caused heaven's might to retreat. Ling Han chuckled, similarly removed his disguise, took a step forward, and asked, Huai Jian, do you still recognize me? You. Huai Jian stared at Ling Han for a while, and then his eyes suddenly lit up. It's you. On the side, the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity also recognized Ling Han, and couldn't help feeling furious. At that time, if it weren't for Ling Han who had released heavenly venerate Wu Le, the Desolate Eternity might have advanced to the position of second-tier heavenly venerate and become the strongest legend. However, due to the damage sustained at that time, he had fallen short of success at the final step, and all his previous efforts had gone to waste. For the past one epoch, he hadn't made any progress at all. Ling Han nodded. It's been a long time. His current structure had since improved exponentially by many times, and he had long since ceased to take Huai Jian to heart. Good. 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 Huai Jian sneered. Back then, you used a heavenly venerate tool to commit crimes. Now, let's see how you can escape this time. Although Ling Han's side also had a heavenly venerate, there were a total of 4 on their side. The most important thing was that this was their world, where the Empress would be suppressed by the power of the dimension, and furthermore would be unable to extract the local unique power. As long as there was enough time, the power within the Empress body would be exhausted, and she would be easily suppressed. Unfortunately, he couldn't have imagined that the Empress had also condensed a core of power, so she didn't have to worry about running out of power, and her power had reached the level of a second-tier heavenly venerate. She alone was capable of conquering this whole dimension. Ling Han was even more terrifying, having the strength of a third-tier heavenly venerate. Humph. The heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity directly moved. He was a veteran heavenly venerate, and was also the strongest in this dimension. There was scarcely anyone like him, so there was no need for him to have any scruples in doing things. Ling Han casually waved his hand, and the heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity's big hand was slapped away. Having finally met again, we should be catching up with one another. What's the hurry? With this movement, everyone was once again dumbfounded. What was going on? That was a heavenly venerate who had just made a move, but he was slapped away like a mosquito in such a relaxed manner. How could this be believed? Pseudo-heavenly venerate. Heavenly venerates Huai Jian, Yellow Spring, and Kai Yang all frowned. Their insight was fine, and yet this made them frown. How could a pseudo-heavenly venerate be so powerful? It wasn't as if they had gone to the celestial realm, and had been suppressed by the power of heaven and earth there. In that case, it wouldn't be surprising if they could only unleash the battle prowess of pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. A strange junior. Heavenly venerate Desolate Eternity's eyes revealed an ominous glint. They had all been warned by Zhu Heng, who forbade them from entering the celestial realm for the rest of their lives, so they had never been able to cause trouble for Ling Han. Now that Ling Han had delivered himself, the Desolate Eternity actually couldn't do anything about it. His chest was slightly bulging, and the pitch-black single horn on his head was shining as he was gathering power for a powerful attack. For a heavenly venerate, this was astonishingly fast. Soon, he would have completed building his power, and could immediately strike against Ling Han. Back then, Ling Han had been able to contend against Huai Jian. Presently, Huai Jian had attained the position of heavenly venerate, whilst Ling Han, having become a pseudo-heavenly venerate, was actually quite normal, and he shouldn't be underestimated. Boom! The Desolate Eternity swooped forward with supreme power. This was an all-out effort, which made even the heaven and earth tremble. The Empress took a step forward, shielding Ling Han's body with her own, and then sent out a palm strike towards Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity. Peng! Sure enough, the Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity was sent flying, and he slammed into the mountain of 10,000 swords, which collapsed to pieces instantly. However, Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity's body did not stop there, but continued to fly towards the sky. Soon, he turned into a little black dot, and could no longer be seen. Everyone lost their voice, and simply felt chills all over their body. A dignified Heavenly Venerate was actually removed by a mere slap. Heavens, what kind of freakishness did this couple possess? The Heavenly Venerates Huaijian, Yellow Spring, and Kai Yang were too shocked to speak. Although each Heavenly Venerate was a top-notch genius of the world, they had to admit that Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity was the strongest among them. But the strongest one had been sent flying with a mere slap from the Empress. What kind of huge gap in strength was this? So what if they were all Heavenly Veneratesses had all gone numb with shock, and they felt a chill in their limbs? Ling Han smiled lightly. It's okay. I'm just here to watch the fun today, since I'm passing by, to see how some old friends are doing. How could Huaijian and the other great Heavenly Venerates believe this? At that time, the foreign realm had almost wiped out the celestial realm. If it weren't for the numerous occurrences of miracles, the current celestial realm would have been swallowed up and fused with the foreign realm by now. Now that the celestial realm had produced an incomparable elite, would he let them off the hook? They quickly sent out a wave of divine sense, summoning more powerful elites, with the intention to besiege the Empress together. After all, this was under the heaven and earth of the foreign realm, and the stronger she was, the more she would be suppressed by the heaven and earth here. Sure enough, the Empress's move had triggered targeted attacks against her by the heaven and earth of the foreign realm, and heavenly tribulation continued to descend endlessly. She didn't care at all. When this kind of attack hit her body, she didn't even feel much. Furthermore, she wasn't afraid that the foreign realm would cut her off from extracting power, as she hadn't extracted any power from here at all. A first-tier Heavenly Venerate was still unable to extract the 6 fundamental powers of the Genesis world. It was just that the Empress had also become annoyed with being continuously attacked. Wouldn't anyone else be vexed as well? Seeing this, Ling Han squeezed the Empress' hand, and said to the heaven and earth, "If you still don't retreat, do you want me to cripple you?" He released a raging aura, aimed directly towards the heaven and earth. Immediately, the lighting and thunder that had obscured the whole sky disappeared without a trace. Fuck, the heaven and earth could also be scared away. Huaijian and the others felt a chill rise up from their limbs. Even they were unwilling to become enemies of the heaven and earth, as the source of their power was after all the unique power of the foreign realm. Once they left this world, they could only be regarded as pseudo-heavenly venerates, and they would only expend their power whilst not being able to absorb any. Their battle prowess would also drop. However, as soon as Ling Han shouted, the heavenly tribulation simply retreated. What kind of power was this? The Empress was already strong enough, but judging from the look of things now, it was clear that Ling Han was even more terrifying. What had happened to the celestial realm to have produced 2 monsters like this? Ling Han spread out his hands. Now, can we catch up on the past? As his words fell, Xiao, 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 he saw 9 heavenly venerates arriving together. Heavenly Venerate Desolate Eternity and Jing Zhongyue also came back, both looking disheveled. In an instant, there appeared 13 heavenly venerates and 1 pseudo-heavenly venerate in this place. This kind of lineup was extremely powerful, and it also proved that the foreign realm was in its golden era because Ling Han had traveled to many low-level dimensions before, and there were not even this many elites there. Does the celestial realm want to restart the war? Heavenly Venerate Yellow Spring asked. Behind him, there was a river of death rushing straight into the heavens. This was his Tao, and those who touched it would die. If Zhu Heng hadn't stepped forward, the celestial realm would have been destroyed. Unexpectedly, after only 1 epoch, it was the celestial realm's turn to turn around and invade the foreign realm. Ling Han shook his head with a smile. I don't represent the celestial realm. Okay, I won't be joking around with you guys anymore. His structure had gotten bigger, and the grievances of the past had also been swept into a forgotten corner by him. He merely sighed. He neither talked about hysteria, nor thought about taking these people to the flaming frost realm. After all, the two dimensions had been enemies for generations, and it was unknown how many people had died because of it. Ling Han had yet to become noble enough to repay grievances with kindness. He sat for a while, and then set off. This was also a warning so that these people would not think that Zhu Heng had long forgotten this place after the passing of one epoch. There was still Ling Han. After Ling Han left, all the great heavenly venerates of the foreign realm were relatively silent. Indeed, Zhu Heng's warning had been already an epoch ago, and he had never reappeared, which caused some heavenly venerates to become restless, wanting to restart the war. Fortunately, Ling Han came in time. Otherwise, wouldn't they all be killed if they had really started the war? Chapter 2768 2768 Return to the Celestial Realm. Chapter 2768 2768 Return to the Celestial Realm. 2768 Return to the Celestial Realm. Ling Han and others soon came to the two-realm passageway. There was a seal left by Zhu Heng here. It wasn't very powerful, but functioned as a serious warning. It was laid by a sixth-tier heavenly venerate. Who would dare to cross over this drawn line? Ling Han stretched out his hand and pressed it on the seal. A flicker of divine sense stirred, and the seal instantly combusted on its own and disappeared. Let's go. They entered the two-realm passageway. Although there had been a surging tide of energy here at the beginning, it had naturally calmed down by now. It was now serene without so much as a ripple here. Very quickly, the group passed through. Although the war had subsided, as the saying went, once bitten, twice shy. Furthermore, how long had Foreign Realm been fighting against the Celestial Realm? About 20 to 30 epochs. Therefore, even if the war had fizzled out, there were still guards here. Who's there? Seeing someone coming from the two-realm passageway, the 7 guards who were of the ascending origin tier immediately shouted, raising their weapons one by one. Hit by the familiar smell, Ling Han raised his head to look up at the sky. Although the aura here was the weakest among all the dimensions that he had traveled, it made him feel the most amiable. He really felt like he was back home. It was just unfortunate that the heaven and the earth immediately reacted. Clang! A flash of lightning appeared, slashing violently towards Ling Han and the Empress. This was the weakest dimension in the entire Genesis world, and the heaven and earth here had the least tolerance for transcenders, so when a heavenly venerate and pseudo-heavenly venerate openly walked about, they would be targeted. Seeing this scene, the guards of Ascension Origin tier were all shocked. They couldn't see through the cultivation level of Ling Han's group, but it didn't matter. Wasn't it clear from the fact that the heavenly tribulation unleashed its divine might? With such mighty power, if any of them was even struck lightly, they would be turned to dust. They rushed to issue a warning. This was far beyond what they could handle. The Empress became furious. Couldn't they get over this already? She glared at the sky angrily, filled with the urge to exterminate it. Let's go, Ling Han said with a smile, stretching out his hand to take hold of everyone. Shoo! All of them disappeared. The first stop was to find the core of the dimension. This was a piece of cake for them, and they very quickly found the place. Ling Han simply stretched out his hand to probe it, and the unique power of the celestial realm was extracted by him and fused into one of his cells. Furthermore, Ling Han also gave a slight threat, and the heaven and earth naturally dared not target him and the Empress again. They exited, and went to look for their parents and various friends. With Ling Han leading the way, they arrived at their destination almost immediately. An epoch had passed, and this place had changed a lot. Originally, it had been just a barren hill, but later developed into a market, then a small town, and finally a huge city now. Ling City. Everyone looked at the 2 big characters on the city gate. At a glance, one could see that these were carved by an elite, exuding an air of boundless deterrence. Ling Han couldn't help smiling. This is the handwriting of Elder Brother. He nodded. When Elder Brother wrote these 2 words, he should have been a 3rd heaven celestial king, but I'm not sure how he is doing now. They entered the city, and paid a star stone as a fee for entering the city. Due to such a long time passing, there were so many changes here that it was overwhelming, so they didn't go directly to seek out Feng Po Yun and the others, and instead went to find an inn first, where they ate and drank while making queries about the current situation. Soon, Ling Han had it figured out. The city was now divided into 3 factions: the Cheng clan, the Feng clan, and the Murong clan, who jointly controlled Ling City. The Cheng clan was of course Ling Han's younger sister Ling Yuan's lineage, as her husband was surnamed Cheng. Now their children had grandchildren, the grandchildren had children, and this continued on for who knew how many generations, so now they had many descendants. The Feng clan was the descendants of Feng Poyan. Unexpectedly, this elder brother had found himself a wife and had children. Meanwhile, the Murong clan was of course the descendants of Murong Qing. The 3 major forces each had a large number of members, but there was no unity among them. Instead, they were fighting for power, causing the relationship among the 3 to become extremely strained. Ling Han couldn't help shaking his head. This had certainly not been Feng Poyan's and Murong Qing's original intention. However, after the line had continued for countless generations, the friendship would of course fade away. He inquired about it, and true enough, both Feng Poyan and Murong Qing were cultivating in seclusion. It was said that they were already 6th heaven celestial kings, and were aiming to break through to the 7th heaven. They hadn't shown up for tens of millions of years. Hence, their descendants began to have disputes. Ling Han shook his head. This was a common problem of all major clans. No matter how great the first generation was when they established a clan, when the line continued for generations, the future generations would gradually deteriorate. Big news! Big news! Someone suddenly shouted. I just got the news that the Feng clan and the Murong clan are going all out in battle. What's going on? Everyone asked, alarmed. 2 major clans were going all out in battle. Were they not afraid that the Cheng clan would pick up the spoils? I heard that it was due to a blood ginseng, which is a superb celestial medicine that can help an ascending origin tier become a celestial king, said the man. Gasp! Everyone gasped. How astonishing was it to have a celestial king produced out of thin air. The Feng clan and the Murong clan might each have a 6th heaven celestial king, but beneath them, the 2 clans had only 1 celestial king respectively. Furthermore, they were still 1st heaven celestial kings. So the significance of having one more celestial king than the other was great indeed, as it could give the clan an overwhelming advantage over the other. Why did the 2 clans ignore the Cheng clan? This was because the Cheng clan didn't even have 1 celestial king. Precisely due to this, it had always been a big mystery that the 3 major clans could stand side by side, because no matter how one would think about it, the Cheng clan didn't have such qualifications. Now that a blood ginseng could help one of ascending origin tier break through to become a celestial king, this naturally made the 2 clans become covetous, and in any case, they didn't need to care about the Cheng clan anyway. After Heavenborn came into being, the celestial path had slowly disappeared. Now, there was no need for someone of the ascending origin tier to go through the celestial path to break through to become a celestial king. Things had gone back to how it had been in the ancient times. Ling Han immediately turned around and stood up. The descendants of Feng Po Yun and Murong Qing were no different from his own descendants. No matter how unworthy the descendants were, he couldn't stand by and watch them kill each other. They came to the residence of the Feng clan. In the fight for the blood ginseng, the Feng clan had temporarily gained the upper hand and managed to snatch the blood ginseng. However, Murong clan's elites had blocked the pathway and surrounded the Feng clan. They wanted the Feng clan to hand over the blood ginseng, or they would face each other in battle. Both sides had dispatched elites. It was a situation wherein a battle could happen at any moment. Ling Han strode forward and walked into the crowd. Who are you? When the people on both sides saw the appearance of someone unrelated, they all turned to look at Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly. Your ancestors and I are brothers. Stop fighting. Being a family and yet engaging in internal strife, do you want others to see all of you make fools of yourselves? Seeing Ling Han's aged and experienced attitude, everyone became furious. How dared you, an ordinary-looking guy, pretend to be their elder? So what now? You say you are the brother of our ancestors, and expect us to address you as ancestor? Where did this madman come from? Hurry up and drive him away. Immediately, someone stretched out a hand to grab at Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head, stretched out his hands, and the heaven and earth instantly reacted. Infinite spiritual qi gathered, and hundreds of ginseng plants could be seen to be growing out of thin air from the ground, growing stronger at a visible speed, and the roots exposed on the ground were as red as blood. "Be blood ginseng," everyone exclaimed, and the person who made a move against Ling Han also stopped in his tracks. Currently, Ling Han was forcibly extracting the power of the heaven and earth to create the celestial medicine and make it grow rapidly. This was a heaven-defying act, but unfortunately, the current celestial realm wasn't as powerful as Ling Han, so it could only be pushed around by him. Chapter 2769, 2769 A short stopover. Chapter 2769, 2769 A short stopover. 2769 A short stopover. What kind of miracle was this? With just a beckoning gesture of his hands, celestial medicines were growing all around him. Furthermore, under Ling Han's might, the age of these stalks of blood ginseng was also rapidly increasing, and they very quickly reached a level wherein they could be used in medicines. "This must be fake, right?" someone asked shakily, completely incapable of believing this. However, could that refreshing, herbal fragrance be faked? Additionally, with several hundred celestial medicines gathered together, they formed a spiritual fog that was so dense it could not be dispersed. Could this be faked as well? Gasp! Their eyes were all bloodshot. One blood ginseng was enough to help an ascending origin tier break through to the celestial king tier. Then just how many celestial kings could be produced with this many blood ginseng? This was really their ancestor's brother. Otherwise, how could he possibly be so generous? They were all excited. This was too amazing. With so many celestial medicines appearing, this would cause a conflict among the great sects of the whole celestial realm. However, they soon became even more excited, not because of joy, but rather due to shock. Because these blood ginseng very quickly grew too much, and were beginning to wilt. A great amount of spiritual qi had solidified, shooting into the skies like smoke. "No," they howled, hurriedly pouncing out one after another. Every single blood ginseng here represented a single celestial king. But Ling Han had used his power, so how could this be something they were able to stop? They could not get close to the blood ginseng at all, and could only watch as they wilted one after another. "Stop!" someone shouted at Ling Han, his eyes bloodshot. He could just barely withhold himself from committing murder. Ling Han smiled faintly. External factors, just like these blood ginseng, would wilt and disappear. But the relationship between brothers and companions would be able to last for eternity. "Give us back the blood ginseng, or you will definitely not come out of this easily." Quite a number of people were glaring at Ling Han, all of them filled with fury. They did not even consider the fact that these blood ginseng had actually been expedited into growing out of thin air by Ling Han. They only knew one thing: since the ginseng plants had appeared in front of them, they were theirs. Ling Han shook his head. Originally, he had wanted to teach these people some facts, but these people could not heed his words at all. Forget it, he was not a good teacher, either. Ling Han clenched his right hand, and the heaven and earth responded once more. Booming sounds of thunder rang out, bolts of lightning striking down all around him. It was like the heaven and earth were raging. This was too terrifying, so the people on both sides couldn't help but fall silent in fear. Ling Han gave a loud battle cry, which turned into a clap of raging thunder. "I, Ling Han, have returned." Boom. Instantly, this was heard throughout the whole Ling city. Not long after, a great many figures shot over from various directions. Hannah, Ling Dongxing and Yu Hongchang appeared. They had already become celestial kings as well. There was also Ling Yuyang. She naturally had also become a celestial king. Otherwise, even if she had advanced into the ascending origin tier, she could never have lived for as long as an epoch. Fourth brother, Feng Po Yun and Murong Qing also appeared. Ancestor. When they saw Feng Po Yun and Murong Qing, everyone fell to their knees. Who did not recognize the two of them? They were both the backbone of Ling City. Small Rock, Ling Qing, Rabbit, Old Ginseng, and the company all approached, especially the rock golem. It bumped Ling Han's legs repeatedly, acting spoilt like a puppy. Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. As a dog, he did not act like a dog, But one that was not a dog acted like one. He was definitely not referring to the large black dog. With a reunion like this, they naturally had countless topics to talk about. They went in to sit down first, and talked about the things that had happened throughout these years. For Feng Po Yun and Murong Qing, their lives were very ordinary. In the past, they had actually ventured out for adventure, but afterwards both of them had basically just gone into seclusion to cultivate inside Ling City. Ling Dongxing and his wife led even more boring lives. They had only managed to attain the Celestial King tier with the help of the alchemical pills concocted by Ling Han. They would never be able to proceed another step further, so they were naturally extremely free and idle. Mostly, they were listening to Ling Han talk about his adventures. That was far more interesting. When they found out that Ling Han had already become a pseudo-heavenly venerate, and the Empress was a first-tier heavenly venerate, everyone naturally couldn't help but feel envy, and even reverence. Even the heavens had to respect a heavenly venerate. Who would dare show them disrespect? Feng Po Yun and Murong Qing also harshly lectured their own descendants. They were all brothers and fellows in arms, so how could they fight among themselves? Ling Han knew that these people would behave themselves for a while, but it would not take too long before they would return to their old ways. Just look, what clan did not experience internal strife? Even in the same family, internal strife could not be settled, what more when it was between families with different surnames? Forget it. He could not bother with so many things, either. First brother, third brother, this time, I have the ability to bring everyone into the flaming frost realm, Ling Han said. He had two purposes in returning to the celestial realm. The first naturally was to extract the power of dimension here, and the second was to bring his parents and close ones to the flaming frost realm. Feng Po Yun and Murong Qing naturally agreed without any hesitation, while Ling Dongxing and his wife had to consider the matter for a while. Ling Yuyang, on the other hand, had no grand ambitions. She only wished to stay in Ling City, by the side of her husband. She already had countless descendants, and there were endless worries for her. Ling Han went to see his uncle as well. Yu Zhenshan and the others were not at Ling City. Instead, they had built another city, which was not very far from here. He gave them a year's time to think it over. A year later, he would bring those who wished to go to the flaming frost realm and set out. Time passed swiftly. Everyone gathered at Ling City, and when they saw each other, it was as if they had returned to an epoch ago. There were not many fellow travelers. The majority of elders wanted to spend the rest of their retirement lives in the celestial realm because they had all broken through with the help of the Celestial King pill, and there was no chance that they could advance another step further. In that case, what was the point of going to the flaming frost realm? There were as many elites there as clouds in the skies. Wasn't this just looking for their own suffering? But a considerable number of young people chose to go for an adventure in a new world. They wanted to find an even brighter future. Ling Han's hand spread out, and he drew all of them into the celestial guest residence. Then, he began to transmigrate through the Genesis world. This was extremely dangerous. Even divine metal would be corroded, and even a second-tier heavenly venerate would not dare make such an attempt. But Ling Han was different. It was true that he was only a pseudo-heavenly venerate, yet he had mastered the powers of dimensions of the entire Genesis world. He was just like a part of this world, and transmigrating from one dimension to another had become extremely easy. He would not encounter any kind of obstruction at all. Merely 50+ years later, Ling Han returned to the flaming frost realm. He had not made arrangements to enroll everyone into the world's paramount martial academy. There were too many prodigies and elites there, and they would only serve to strike a blow to their pride. It would not have any encouraging effects on them. Ling Han merely found a peaceful, safe place, and settled everyone there, having them cultivate there. Of course, they could also travel and roam to other places. He left behind some treasures which were powerful enough to suppress a ninth heaven celestial king. After settling them down, Ling Han set out, and returned to the martial academy again. He officially applied to quit school. From now onwards, he was no longer a member of the martial academy. He would no longer get the protection of the martial academy, and at the same time, There was no need for him to be bound by the rules of the Martial Academy any longer, even if a heavenly venerate would not care about any rules at all in the first place. The Empress and bewitching maiden Ru also quit school. The three of them made some preparations, and then set out towards the realm battlefield. Regarding Ling Han's application to quit school, the authorities of the Martial Academy were naturally confused. That was because Ling Han had already become a cripple, so it was naturally impossible that he would break any more rules of the Martial Academy. In that case, it should be better for him to grasp onto his identity as a disciple of the Martial Academy. That way, no one could harm him openly. Why had he taken the initiative to surrender this identity? Amidst their confusion, Ling Han and the others had already set out. At the realm battlefield, the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate suddenly stood. "Brat, you have finally appeared." His killing intent gushed out. Chapter 2770 Imperial Void Moves. Chapter 2770, 2770 Imperial Void Moves. 2770 Imperial Void Moves. If it had been Ling Han before the accident, the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate would never have dared to attack Ling Han. Even Crimson Cloud's Heavenly Venerate wasn't Ling Han's match, let alone the Imperial Void. That was why he had asked for help from his master. However, before the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable made a move, the news of Ling Han being crippled came out, and after a 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate's examination, this matter was confirmed, so there was no need for the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable to make a move. Having a 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerate deal with a cripple? How insulting was this towards the Heavenly Venerate? The Imperial Void didn't even know how far overqualified he himself was for making the move personally. He could have casually sent anyone to deal with Ling Han, but if he couldn't avenge his son's murder with his own hands, he wouldn't be at peace in his heart. Hence, the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate took action himself. His speed was very fast. He couldn't allow Ling Han to enter the realm battlefield, or he would have scruples when he made his move. If someone was to find out that he injured a comrade in arms, even a 7th-tier Heavenly Venerate wouldn't be able to protect him, especially when Ling Han had previously made such a great contribution for the Genesis world. Literally, his ranking was still listed on the general leaderboard, and no one would be able to threaten his position for at least dozens of epochs. In a valley, the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate finally intercepted Ling Han and his traveling companions. Xiao, his figure emerged, exuding a strong killing intent, and the pain of losing his son made his eyes bloodshot. "Ling Han, where do you think you are going?" he demanded coldly. Whether he was a good person or a villain, a sinner or a hero, it might be left to history to pass judgment, but he was definitely a loving father. Ling Han showed a faint smile. Why had he insisted on going back to the Martial Academy to remove his status as a disciple? Firstly, he wanted to release the news that he was going to the realm battlefield in order to lure out those who harbored ill intentions towards him. Ling Han was just a cripple now one. Although there were 9th Heaven celestial kings by his side, a pseudo-heavenly venerate was enough to deal with them. Secondly, without Ling Han possessing the identity of a disciple of the Martial Academy, the perpetrator could be more relaxed in revealing their murderous intentions. Even if the matter of this battle was leaked, it would be just an ordinary vendetta, and there would be no need to bear any responsibility. The appearance of the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate was within Ling Han's expectations. What he wanted to know was whether there would be other people as well. For example, Zhuo Bing, whose son had been slapped to death by the Empress. However, the Empress had had the status of a disciple of the Martial Academy to protect her at that time. Would this person show up this time? Now Ling Han was truly pretending to be a pig to devour a tiger. What he didn't know was how many big tigers would be showing up. "Imperial Void, it's been a long time," Ling Han said. Among the people whom he hated the most, the Imperial Void was definitely ranked among the top 3. During the invasion of the foreign realm, not only did the Heavenly Venerate level forces, headed by the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable, Zhou Heavenly Venerate, and Green Flames Heavenly Venerate, not resist the foreign enemies, but they also kept being a hindrance, and the Imperial Void was the one who had tried to take Ling Han's property and kill him several times. Hence, Ling Han didn't really bear deep hatred towards the elites of the foreign realm, because if he had been to swap positions with them, he might have done the same thing as the foreign realm's elites under the oppression of the general environment. However, traitors were absolutely not to be tolerated in his eyes, and had to be punished. It's been a very, very long time, the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate said solemnly, his eyes fixed on Ling Han. He wouldn't simply kill Ling Han, he had to let this villain go through the highest extent of suffering and torture before killing him. You are an elite of the Celestial Realm, but you didn't show up when the Celestial Realm needed you. Not only that, you even harmed the compatriots of the Celestial Realm. Betraying your own people and helping the enemy, how can a beast like you have the gall to stay alive? Ling Han said sarcastically. The Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate didn't get angry. If he had been one to lose his temper so easily, how could he have broken through to become a Heavenly Venerate? He just smiled faintly, but the killing intent became more and more intense. How do you want to die? The Imperial Void asked. Old bastard, you are the one who should die. The Empress rushed out, raised her hands, and delivered a strike towards Imperial Void. Boom, the power exploded to the heavens. The Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate was disdainful at first, but when the Empress made a move, he could clearly see that the latter was a first-tier Heavenly Venerate, which caught him slightly by surprise. However, that was about it. How could it be that a second-tier Heavenly Venerate like him couldn't suppress a first-tier Heavenly Venerate? But when he realized the power of this strike by the Empress, he was affected. So strong, this was definitely not the might of a first-tier. Peng. The two exchanged blows. Both people trembled, and they retreated continuously. Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate stood still. He didn't suffer much from this blow, but he didn't gain much advantage in this exchange, either. He was aware that he hadn't advanced to the second-tier Heavenly Venerate very long ago, and that his battle prowess could not be compared to that of a veteran second-tier Heavenly Venerate, but wasn't the fact that a second-tier Heavenly Venerate would suppress a first-tier Heavenly Venerate a matter of course and naturally, right? How could this woman be so powerful? Could it be that those with Ling Han were all super freaks? The Imperial Void frowned. Although he had a slight advantage in strength, defeating the Empress wouldn't be an easy feat. This matter wasn't easy to deal with. Despite having these thoughts on his mind, the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate naturally didn't have the slightest intention of giving up. This was the best chance to get rid of Ling Han, and he still had the advantage in terms of circumstances, but it wouldn't be as easy as he had imagined. He would have to spend a little bit of effort. The Empress was putting up a defense, but if she stayed on the defensive for a long time, she would certainly be caught off guard at some point. As long as he could grab a chance, he would be able to kidnap Ling Han. Of course, if it was possible, the Imperial Void would want to capture everyone, and torture and kill them one by one in front of Ling Han so that the latter could also have a taste of losing his loved ones. Ah, right, this brat also has a son. Hee. The Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate moved and attacked the Empress. This first-tier Heavenly Venerate ought not to be underestimated. The Empress let out a clear whistle, and charged ahead without fear. She wasn't as fearful and nervous as the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate thought, because Ling Han's battle prowess was stronger than hers, and he could break through to become a first-tier Heavenly Venerate at any time. Was there a need for her to worry? The two people battled intensely. Ever since the Empress had broken through to the Heavenly Venerable tier, she hadn't fought against a real Heavenly Venerate. Hence, with her fighting spirit blazing, she fought very aggressively, and continuously delivered strong attacks. This angered the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate to the extreme. Do you think that you really are a second-tier Heavenly Venerate? He also let out a loud roar, unleashed a Heavenly Venerate technique, and fought head-on with the Empress. The fierce battle between the two great Heavenly Venerates set off a terrible storm, whereby the stars fell, the mountains were easily flattened, and the seas evaporated in an instant. This was the collision of powers that surpassed regulations. Its destructive power was absolutely terrifying. However, no matter what, the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate was unable to suppress the Empress. He was quite shocked. Logically speaking, under his high-intensity suppression, the Empress should barely be able to catch her breath. Her strength ought to be exhausted soon. After all, she was just a first tier. But after fighting for so long, the Empress' power could still be maintained at such a high level, just like at the beginning of the fight, which made him unable to believe and accept it at all. If this was to continue, could he really suppress the Empress? He changed his mind, and glanced at Ling Han. It would be better to take down the main person first. He could go all out in the fight that way. Being able to take down the Empress would be the most ideal, but if he couldn't, then there was no loss. Brother Imperial Void, do you need my help? At this moment, a voice was suddenly heard. The Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate was stunned for a moment, and then he was overjoyed. Brother Zhuo Bing, Zhuo Kai's father, a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. The Imperial Void had just recently advanced to become a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, but Zhuo Bing had done so much earlier because when the former had still been at the 9th heaven, Zhuo Bing had already been a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. With the two Heavenly Venerates joining forces, not only would they be able to take down Ling Han easily, even suppressing this weird first-tier Heavenly Venerate would not be a problem. Chapter 2771, 2771 Easily Killed. Chapter 2771, 2771 Easily Killed. 2771 Easily Killed. Zhuo Bing appeared, standing proudly in midair. He had the same thought as the Imperial Void. He wanted to dispose of Ling Han when the latter was about to enter the realm battlefield, or there would be some problems. Although it was only minor trouble, why suffer it if it could be avoided? Brother Zhuo, you take down that villain, and then join hands with me to suppress this weird woman, the Imperial Void Heavenly Venerate said. Zhuo Bing nodded. Originally, he couldn't have cared less about a first-tier Heavenly Venerate, but the Empress was so powerful that he also became curious, wanting to know the reason. For them, improving their cultivation level and increasing their strength actually surpassed everything else in importance. Even their own sons couldn't compare. Zhuo Bing looked at Ling Han coldly, and a cold smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. In his point of view, a cripple was naturally easy to capture, even if there was a 9th heaven celestial king by his side to protect him. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Would you believe that I can send you flying with one slap?" Zhuo Bing didn't want to bother responding at all. The current Ling Han could only show off his ability with his mouth. Was there a need for Zhuo Bing to argue with a cripple? He stretched out his hands to grab Ling Han. Boom! Endless power condensed and turned into a giant dark golden hand, upon which seals that surpassed regulations appeared. These were heavenly venerable seals, but there was no way to manifest them. They were indeterminate and difficult to grasp. With a single palm strike, he wanted to take down Ling Han and bewitching Maiden Ru together. Ling Han shook his head, and countered with a palm strike. Boom! Similarly, endless power condensed and transformed into a massive golden hand that met Zhuo Bing's hand. In that single exchange of blows, the giant dark golden hand instantly exploded, while the golden palm didn't stop, but continued on its course towards Zhuo Bing. What? Zhuo Bing turned pale with shock. Wasn't Ling Han a cripple? How could he have such formidable strength? Are you kidding me? If he is considered a cripple, then what does that make me? A major cripple? Before Zhuo Bing could finish his thought, the giant hand was already close to hitting him. Zhuo Bing quickly dodged, but it was too late, so he could only protect his body. To be exact, the attack hit his face because this palm strike was aimed at it. Pa! The slap landed, and he was sent flying immediately. Peng, 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 peng. It was unknown just how many mountains he had broken along the way, but Zhuo Bing had only one thought in his mind: what kind of a cripple was this person? He was a fuck third-tier Heavenly Venerate. Zhuo Bing was terrified to the core, so much that he didn't even spare causing trouble for Ling Han a thought. His only thought was to run away. Run! The farther he could get away from this crippled Ling Han, the better. In this life, he would no longer believe the claim that Ling Han was crippled. This was a scam. T. Zhuo Bing steadied his body, and was about to turn around and run, but was shocked to see another big hand grabbing him. I said that I would send you flying with a slap, didn't I? It was none other than Ling Han. Zhuo Bing only felt his heart severely constrict. Fortunately, a Heavenly Venerate would have at least this bit of composure. He remained calm in the face of danger, and just barely stretched out his hand to block the strike. As long as he could catch his breath, no matter how serious the injury, he didn't Kurehe only wanted to escape. He attempted to parry, but his arm seemed to be made of noodles, and was absolutely unable to withstand the strike. Ling Han's hand drove straight in and grabbed his chest. He was a second-tier heavenly venerate, yet was not able to even withstand a single blow. As for the current Ling Han, his intent realm had reached perfection, and he had the power of all the dimensions in the Genesis world in his body. How terrifying would the eruption of such power be? He could possibly rival a third-tier heavenly venerate. Ling Han grabbed Shuabing. He shook his right hand several times. Under the violent impact, Shuabing's bones were smashed to pieces, and he had completely lost all his battle prowess. Ling Han took another step, and instantly returned to the valley. Of course, the current valley had completely disappeared, flattened by the battle prowess of two heavenly venerates. The Imperial Void heavenly venerate was fighting fiercely with the Empress. He didn't realize that Shuabing had been sent flying with a slap just now. Seeing a figure flying towards him, his only thought was that Shuabing had already taken down Ling Han. He laughed loudly. "Brother Zhua, so you have taken down that brat?" The Imperial Void heavenly venerate turned his head, and his expression suddenly became extremely interesting. What in the world was going on? Apparently, Ling Han, who ought to have been captured without a fight, was holding Shuabing with his hand, while Shuabing was dangling limply like a dead dog. He had to be seeing things. A cripple had taken down a second-tier heavenly venerate, and in such a short period of time? That has got to be a lie. In that moment of distraction, the Imperial Void heavenly venerate was struck nearly head-on by the Empress, which sent him retreating for several kilometers. Blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. One had to pay the price for one's own negligence. However, he took no notice of it at all, and just stared blankly at Ling Han, as if he was seeing a ghost. Ling Han smiled. "You're extremely disappointed and shocked, aren't you?" The Imperial Void heavenly venerate finally calmed down, and said, "You weren't crippled. So this was all a smoke screen to deceive him." Ling Han shook his head. "Don't think too highly of yourself. I disdain stooping to that level." The Imperial Void heavenly venerate pondered. "You were indeed crippled before, but now not only have you recovered, but your strength has improved." "That's right." Ling Han nodded. The Imperial Void heavenly venerate turned around, and was about to tear a rip in space to leave. Even Shuabing, someone stronger than him, was defenseless, let alone him. He even wondered, if the sealed emotion heavenly venerable made a move, could he do anything to Ling Han? Run back to the realm battlefield. It was just that the Imperial Void had obviously overestimated his own ability, or underestimated Ling Han's strength. Peng! The space that he had just torn apart immediately shattered, and a big hand stretched over, grabbing his neck. It was Ling Han. The Imperial Void heavenly venerate turned pale in shock. Although he had seen that Shuabing had been taken down by Ling Han, and concluded that Ling Han's strength had to be superior, he hadn't directly witnessed it. It was only now that he knew how strong Ling Han was. In other words, he now knew how overwhelming would the suppression of a third-tier heavenly venerate against a second-tier heavenly venerate be. He was powerless to resist, and eventually fell into Ling Han's hands. He only felt anger and resentment. In the past, when he had wanted to kill Ling Han, it had just been a simple matter as easy as turning his hand over, but now, even if he had become a second-tier heavenly venerate, he wasn't Ling Han's match at all. He regretted it so deeply. Feeling regret. Ling Han smiled. What you should feel regret for is why you didn't make any contribution to the celestial realm back then, and why you insisted on bullying me, which led to consequences that you are facing now. Everything that has happened. You asked for it. Brat, kill me as you wish, but don't even think that I will bow down to you, the Imperial Void heavenly venerate shouted. Having become a heavenly venerate, he had to be a person with a firm will. How could he be spineless? Okay. Ling Han nodded, and with a shake of his left hand, all the bones in Imperial Void heavenly venerate's body were smashed to pieces. He put both his hands together again. Peng! The Imperial Void heavenly venerate and Shuabing crashed into each other, and became a bloody mess. Both of them were mushed together, which was deserving of them after having joined forces for once. Ling Han casually threw down the corpses of the two heavenly venerates. In his eyes, the Imperial Void was merely a small character. The two people whom he really remembered were the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable and Jowu Heavenly Venerate. The Green Flames Heavenly Venerate was fine, because she didn't become enemies with him after all, and even crossed paths with him once, so he didn't have any strong animosity for her. The one man and two women continued to forge ahead, heading towards the realm battlefield. What made Ling Han wonder whether he ought to be happy or disappointed was that no one else came out to attack him anymore. Did they believe that I wouldn't be able to escape death when the Imperial Void and Zhuobing made a move, and thus did not even bother to make another move, or are these two people the only ones who insisted on putting me to death? Ling Han murmured. Chapter 2772, 2772 Return of a Cripple. Chapter 2772, 2772 Return of a Cripple. 2772 Return of a Cripple. After several decades, Ling Han and company finally returned to the realm battlefield. However, when they came to the barrier, it wasn't the same one. In the past epoch, Hysteria's army had launched countless attacks, which caused the barriers to fall one by one, and the defense line had retreated a lot. This was a newly built barrier, and behind it, a new barrier was currently being built, with only 1/3 of construction being completed. It was still a long way from completion. Ling Han and the Empress first went to cancel their leave. Of course, the Heavenly Venerate who was overseeing here had already been replaced. He was surprised when he heard that Ling Han and the Empress said that they wanted to cancel their leave. What was going on? They wanted to cancel their leave. He then recognized that the person standing in front of him was Ling Han. Ling Han, he called out, feeling rueful. It's been more than an epoch, I didn't expect that you would come back. He was Zhu Yang, who had fought against Ling Han when he had been competing for the 7 Deaths 7 Explosions pill. After an epoch, he had also successfully stepped into the position of Heavenly Venerate. This kind of breaking through the levels couldn't be compared to a freak such as Wu Haoyang, but no matter where, this could still be considered fast. See, Ling Han himself was still a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han nodded. We finally came back. Zhu Yang couldn't help shaking his head. How majestic and domineering Ling Han was back then. He wasn't inferior compared to Wu Haoyang, and even had a slight upper hand. But now, Wu Haoyang had already reached the 4th tier, while Ling Han had become a cripple. What a turn of fate! The heavens' will was unpredictable. Brother Ling, what are your plans? Considering Ling Han's freakishness back then, Zhu Yang was very polite. Besides, he had already become a Heavenly Venerate, so he had naturally long forgotten about his defeat to Ling Han. They should focus on the future, not the past. Ling Han smiled. I plan to live here for a while, get to know the situation of my old friends, and then make further plans. At that time, he would break through to the Heavenly Venerable tier and proceed to the 2nd spatial level. Zhu Yang nodded. Okay, you can stay here. Do come to me if you need anything. Thank you. Ling Han smiled. Truly, this was what friends in need are friends indeed meant. Zhu Yang did not have much of a relationship with Ling Han, but he was willing to say such words. It really wasn't easy. When the news of Ling Han's return came out, it immediately caused quite a commotion. Who is Ling Han? Sai, you are a newcomer who came only 7 trillion years ago, it's no wonder that you don't know. What, I've been here for 7 trillion years, yet I'm still considered a newcomer? Of course, this Ling Han was a fierce man 1 epoch ago. Go and check out the general leaderboard at Celestial Administration. Who is the person ranked 34th? Gasp, he is that Ling Han? Nonsense, who else if not him? But, he was already so fierce 1 epoch ago, so why is he still here now? Sai, this is the fall from the pinnacle of one's power. Before, Ling Han spent an epoch of hard training, and he was able to defeat a 2nd-tier Heavenly Venerate as a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. His reputation had reached its peak. However, he failed to break through into Heavenly Venerable tier. Now, he has become a cripple. The newcomers slowly learned about Ling Han's formidable strength and freakishness from the lips of the veterans, and they all felt it was such a pity that a freak would fall to such a bleak state. Of course, there were many newcomers who were not convinced. Could a pseudo-heavenly venerate defeat a second-tier heavenly venerate? Why not exaggerate it even further and say that he could even defeat a seventh-tier heavenly venerate? But no matter what, the current Ling Han was merely a cripple, who had come here to spend his retirement peacefully. Due to the fact that he had previously offended too many people, he might not be safe even in the world's paramount martial academy. It would be different here, where internal strife was strictly prohibited, or those involved would face execution. Hence, it could be said that it would be absolutely safe here. He's nothing but a coward. For some newcomers, there was a very long generational gap between them and Ling Han's domineering era, and they couldn't help mocking him. This is the realm battlefield, not a place for retirement. What's the point of living for such a person? Internal strife was not allowed here, so these people would hang around Ling Han's front door every day, saying some sarcastic words, and hoping that Ling Han would have the self-consciousness to quickly leave on his own. Ling Han just pretended not to hear. He wanted to fish around to see how many people would harbor ill intentions for him and who applied under a friend in need is a friend indeed. How many people would still come to visit Ling Han upon hearing the news that he had been crippled? Before, when Ling Han was in the martial academy, the people in the realm battlefield couldn't simply take their leave to visit him. However, things were different now as they were only separated by levels, so traveling to and fro was very convenient. Not long after, Ling Han's old friends came over one after another. There were many people, such as the Rain Emperor, Yi, Kanyu, Amu, Du Shi, Ji Wuming, Hua Furong, and, of course, the large black dog and karmic life heavenly venerable. Now, all of them have become heavenly venerates. Of course, there were also the father and son duo of Ling Zhenxue and Ling Feifen. Ling Zhenxue had already become a first-tier heavenly venerate, while Ling Feifen had also achieved the position pseudo-heavenly venerate. At the moment, he was still on the first spatial level. "Where's Yang Xianlu?" Ling Han asked. "He was killed," Yi said. As early as 11 trillion years ago, not long after Yang Xianlu came to the first spatial level, he died in battle in a siege of Hysteria's army. Ling Han couldn't help but feel regret. He and Yang Xianlu had a very long friendship. He didn't expect to suddenly hear the news of the latter's death. However, there were more people who would thrive and become stronger in such bloody wars. Peerless freaks like Amu had become a second-tier heavenly venerate, while the Rain Emperor and Karmic Life heavenly venerable were not far away from becoming second-tier heavenly venerates themselves. Only Yi and the large black dog were way too inferior, and being a first-tier heavenly venerate might be as far as they could go. This was because they were in the flaming frost realm. Otherwise, had they been in the celestial realm, even being a first-tier heavenly venerate would have been an extravagant hope. Everyone chatted and caught up with one another for several days. However, they couldn't leave their posts for too long, so they left behind some treasures for Ling Han as they departed one by one. It was unknown if the goods would be of any use to Ling Han, but even a little bit of use would be good. They hoped that Ling Han could get better soon. "I really miss the time when I competed with you," Ji Wuming said. Ling Han laughed heartily. "I only hope that you can always maintain such confidence." Everyone left one by one, and Ling Han's residence became quiet again. In fact, many people had died during this period. Besides Yang Xianlu, most of the prodigies who had come from the celestial realm were buried in places away from their native land, such as Anran, Meng Feiqing, the Thousand-Word Celestial King, the Cloud-Void Celestial King, and so on. This place was a meat grinder. Although it could make people experience rapid growth, it was also full of dangers. In the end, most people would die miserably and rot away. Ling Han was feeling sorrowful, and came to mourn in front of the Monument of Heroes. This monument was used to commemorate all the warriors who died here. After such a long time, the number of heroes who died in battle was astonishingly high. It took some time even for Ling Han's divine sense to sweep across the monument once. He paid homage to the deceased here. He poured a cup of wine, spilled it onto the ground, and paid respects to those compatriots from the celestial realm who had passed away. "Yo, who's putting up an act?" someone said from behind. "Isn't that the cripple who is afraid of death?" someone continued smilingly. "Those heroes have all died in battle. but a cripple is still living an ignoble existence. It doesn't matter, let him fend for himself the next time when Hysteria's army strikes. There were a total of 7 people here, and they continued their conversation in an extremely mocking manner. They indeed couldn't bear to see Ling Han, a cripple who hid here in order to survive. This was a place where warriors fought, a temple for heroes. How could it accommodate a coward? The Empress became furious, and wanted to make a move. Ling Han stretched out his arms to hold her back. There were merely a few little brats, so there was no need to bother with them. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! At this moment, a heart-piercing cry was heard. Chapter 2773, 2773 Retreat. Chapter 2773, 2773 Retreat. 2773 Retreat. Enemy attack. Enemy attack here only meant one thing. Hysteria's army came assaulting again. Xiao, the 7 young people who had been mocking Ling Han earlier, immediately ran back, and paid no further regard to Ling Han. Let's go back too, Ling Han said. He, together with the Empress and bewitching Maiden Ru, went directly to the city wall, and immediately heard the rumbling noise coming from outside. The earth trembled, and the heaven and earth were moved. The attack this time surpassed those in the past, someone said. Listening to the movement, it's absolutely terrifying. The scale of this attack is too large, another person also said, his voice trembling. It was no wonder that he couldn't control himself. Under a large-scale attack, they would suffer countless casualties, and a super large-scale attack would not only cause more casualties, but even destroy the entire barrier, forcing them to pull back the defense line. Ling Han was also a little startled because, judging from the shaking of the ground, Hysteria's army this time was indeed terrifying. He looked at the Empress and bewitching Maiden Ru. Once the battle begins, go all out. The attack this time was extremely frightening. It was very likely that the barrier would no longer exist after this battle. Moreover, the next line of defense had yet to be completely constructed. Therefore, if this line of defense was lost, Hysteria's army would march straight in unchallenged. Of course, if they went in too deep, the heavenly venerates would not be suppressed by the heaven and earth of the 2 dimensions, and could fight at full strength, so a 2nd-tier heavenly venerate or a 3rd-tier heavenly venerate would be able to deal with the situation, but this meant a major defeat of the defense line. The key to the war between the 2 dimensions lay in territory. As soon as they retreated, Hysteria would be able to forge ahead and devour the area. Such advancement would cause the acceleration of the demise of the flaming frost realm. Therefore, every inch of land had to be fought for, and could not be lost. Both the Empress and bewitching Maiden Ru nodded. They were also aware of the seriousness of this war. Boom, the city defense launched an attack first, and the impact of multiple light waves caused great damage. The first rows of Hysteria's army fell bit by bit, but the people standing at the top of the city wall turned pale in shock. Because compared to before, the number of fallen troops was too small. The reason was that the body of every soldier of Hysteria's army was shining with metallic light, some golden, some silver, black, green, all various colors, and very vivid. Divine metal. Everyone gasped. In the previous period of war, Hysteria's army came naked, without weapons and armor, but this time, it was different. Although divine metal couldn't completely block the impact of the light waves, it was the strongest existence at the level of regulations, after all, and would be able to display some defensive effect. Furthermore, this was only the first spatial level, so the power of light waves was limited. Had Hysteria not thought of it before? Obviously it was impossible. It had just manifested into a dimension, but had not always been a dimension, without any reasoning ability. This only proved that it did not have the ability to create divine metal on a large scale before, but now it was capable of doing it. This was by no means good news, as it simply meant that Hysteria had gotten stronger. Now everyone was not in the mood to think about this issue. A large number of Hysteria's soldiers had already flown over the city wall and started a massive attack. Their individual battle prowess was extremely strong. A 3-headed tiger fluttered its wings and landed. The 3 heads spewed out flames, lightning, and black water, respectively, instantly causing great destruction. Tragic screams could be heard over and over again. The three-headed tiger possessed the battle prowess of a pseudo-heavenly venerate, but the warriors here were mainly the ninth heaven celestial kings. How could they stop a pseudo-heavenly venerate from showing his might? Just as a single blow was about to cause heavy casualties, a loud bang was heard, and the three-headed tiger was blown up into a rain of blood. Those few lucky people cast a glance, only to find that the person who had blasted the three-headed tiger with one punch and saved their lives was actually Ling Han. Coincidentally, they were the ones who had previously taunted Ling Han at the Monument of Heroes. Now they were both shocked and ashamed to be saved by the one they had called cripple. Live well. Ling Han left them with these words, stood up immediately, and charged forwards. Is he really a cripple? No, he's a hero. These people murmured. Ling Han went on a killing rampage. His current strength was extremely high. Moreover, his strength came from himself, and was self-sustainable. Naturally, he wouldn't be suppressed by the heaven and earth. No matter which dimension he was in, his battle prowess would not change in any way. Peng! He punched out, sending out a gust of power, which turned into a ball of light. Peng! A huge black wolf was immediately blown up, but the light ball did not dissipate, and continued to move forward. Peng! 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 7 monsters were killed in a single breath, and finally the energy was exhausted. And this was just a casual strike for Ling Han. His body was like lightning, zigzagging through the long battle lines, and when he did strike, it didn't matter whether one was pseudo-heavenly venerate or not, as one would be blasted to smithereens anyway. Everyone could see that a figure was zigzagging and killing the enemies, displaying an invincible posture. However, although Ling Han was very fast, he couldn't cope with the front line that was too long. When he reached the other end, the barrier at that end had already fallen, and a large number of monsters poured into the city, killing on a large scale. Ling Han roared, and charged back from the other end. Wherever he was, the monsters at that place wouldn't survive at all. However, he was only one person, after all, and was not capable of being everywhere at the same time. Retreat, he shouted loudly. Everyone retreat. Zhu Yang also knew that the defense line could no longer be defended. The scale of Hysteria's army this time was far greater than before, and they were even equipped with divine metal, which greatly weakened the role of the city defense. If they were to engage in a fierce battle here, there was no way of knowing how many people would be sacrificed. He issued an order for the main troops to retreat. However, Ling Han stayed back. He had had some reservations earlier because the enemies were mixed in together with comrades, but as soon as the people were cleared, he could go all out and fight. He drew bewitching maiden Ru into the celestial guest residence. The Empress was a first-tier heavenly venerate, and her power came from within herself, just like it was with him. Not only was her strength greater, but her power was also endless, so there was no need to worry about Ling Han's wife lacking in strength. Ling Han directly charged out of the barrier, and just like when he had fought with Wu Haoyang back then, he went on a killing rampage, only that this time it was the Empress by his side. The two teamed up. Boom! They shot out a powerful blast that was like a tidal wave, and group after group of monsters fell consecutively. These main troops were not afraid of death, and all of them attacked, trying to kill Ling Han and the Empress. 10 celestial kings at the peak of the 9th heaven could contend against one pseudo-heavenly venerate, and 10 pseudo-heavenly venerates were enough of a match for a real heavenly venerate. This being the case, how terrifying was the battle prowess of a few 100,000 to tens of millions of pseudo-heavenly venerates here when they joined forces? Ling Han didn't want to give it a try at all. He descended to the ground so as not to become a living target in the skies. He and the Empress fought among the monsters, using these monsters as shields. They only needed to withstand the attacks of the surrounding monsters, which numbered a few hundred at most. This was completely within the range that Ling Han and the Empress could bear. Countless monsters had fallen, but still many of them had slipped through their fingers, and were charging towards the main troops. Ling Han wasn't able to control these things. Should he quickly give chase, he would definitely become a living target. He had no idea if he could block the attacks of so many pseudo-heavenly venerates. Moreover, the war wasn't just the matter of one person, so there was no need for him to take everything upon himself. Kill. Chapter 2774, 2774 Standing Alone. Chapter 2774, 2774 Standing Alone. 2774 Standing Alone. Ling Han killed till the whole world became dark. He had powerful battle prowess, comparable to that of a third-tier heavenly venerate. Furthermore, this power came from himself entirely. It was like a dimension was transmitting power to him. It was endless and continuous, but under such intense fighting, he actually felt a hint of weariness. This was because he was only a pseudo-heavenly venerate, after all. The power of dimension in his body was only a model, and had not transformed into an actual dimension, so the power supplied to him was naturally limited. Usually, it would be fine. Even if he had to battle a third-tier heavenly venerate, he would not be anxious, but there were really too many pseudo-heavenly venerates here. With several hundred of them blasting him at the same time, it was extremely exhausting for him. This time, it was not like how it had been an epoch ago. Not only were there more of Hysteria's troops, they were also protected by divine metal, so it was more difficult to kill them now. Even Ling Han felt slightly strained, so it was even worse for the Empress. Even her smooth hair was slightly disheveled, and she was breathing heavily. You should rest first. Ling Han drew the Empress into the celestial guest residence. Their recovery would only have to begin from themselves, and there was no need for them to communicate with the heaven and earth. Thus, it could be done anywhere. The celestial guest residence was naturally safe. Ling Han drew the divine demon sword, and went all out. One after another, sword rays sliced forwards. He used the 5 elements lightning technique, continuously blasting out terrifying lightning. A single strike was capable of killing several dozen monsters. However, there were really too many monsters, and they were still surging towards him endlessly. Very soon, Ling Han was completely drowned by their numbers. The main troops retreated, and they very soon arrived at the second line of defense. There were still construction works for the defense ongoing here, and the city defense was far from completion. One of the heavenly venerates in charge of overseeing and commanding here asked, "What is going on? Why have you all retreated here?" Zhu Yang informed him truthfully, and the other heavenly venerate paled in great shock. The frequency of Hysteria's assaults was increasing further and further. Originally, a large-scale attack like this would only occur once every several million years, but they were continuously increasing in frequency in the last several 100 million years, going from once in several 100,000 years to once in tens of thousands of years, and then to once for every several thousand years. When was the last occurrence of such an assault? 700 years ago. Just this little bit of time had passed, and a super large-scale assault had happened again. What were they supposed to do? Though they were already speeding up the construction of the second line of city defense, it would take another 200 years at the very least. We can only fight to the death, Zhu Yang declared. This place definitely cannot be conquered. Otherwise, we would be allowing Hysteria's troops to invade directly unchallenged. The other heavenly venerate nodded. He told everyone to stop the construction works and prepare for battle. Only a while later, Hysteria's main troops attacked. Just so few of them? The other heavenly venerate asked. He had heard Zhu Yang say how Hysteria had unleashed a super large-scale assault, but from the look of things now, this should not have been enough to force Zhu Yang and company to abandon the city and flee. Zhu Yang was also taken aback. Though Hysteria's troops that had pursued them were still everywhere, compared to what had been visible from above the barrier, there was no comparison. Ling Han, Zhu Yang murmured. What? The other heavenly venerate looked strangely at him. What did he mean? I think that the reason why Hysteria's troops have become so few is probably because of one man. Zhu Yang breathed out deeply, the expression on his face indescribably complicated. How could that be? The other heavenly venerate exclaimed in shock. There is suppression from heaven and earth here. Even a 7th-tier heavenly venerate would be affected should they come here. Even compared with a pseudo-heavenly venerate, their strength would be limited. How could anyone possibly have blocked a super large-scale assault? Because this man is Ling Han, Zhu Yang answered. Ling Han? Which Ling Han? The other heavenly venerate's expression was filled with confusion. The Ling Han who had left behind his name on the general leaderboard an epoch ago, Zhu Yang replied. As expected of Ling Han, he was incredibly freakish and powerful. That Ling Han? The other heavenly venerate also recalled by now. At this time, Hysteria's troops had already reached them, and he joined the battles as well. Though cultivation levels would be suppressed here, and he could only unleash power on the level of pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, he was a heavenly venerate, after all. His battle prowess far surpassed pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Hasn't he already become a cripple? He asked in confusion. Zhu Yang shook his head, and laughed in spite of himself. If he is a cripple, then I will be the trash of all trash. The other heavenly venerate was surprised. He knew that Ling Han had indeed been freakish in the past, but was there any need for Zhu Yang to demean himself like this? Zhu Yang did not speak any further. The battle situation was really too intense. Without city defense, every single person could only immerse themselves in blood as they battled. Who knew how many people would be sacrificed in battle? But because the number of Hysteria's troops that had rushed forth had greatly diminished, the front line had been extended, and they still steadied themselves, the war situation entered into a stalemate. This naturally was because of Ling Han, but no one could be concerned about this hero now, because the consequences would still be more than terrible once they failed here. 10 days, and then a month. This battle continued for a whole 47 days, so long that even the second, third, and fourth spatial levels dispatched elites as reinforcements, and only then did they manage to completely eliminate all of Hysteria's troops. What? Ling Han is actually battling the main troops alone at the barrier. When they heard this, everyone was stunned speechless. Led by elites, the Flaming Frost Realm began to recover their lost territories, and when they came to the barrier, they could see that most of the city wall had been destroyed, and there was one hill after another of dead bodies outside the city wall. There are still sounds of battle ahead, someone with sharp hearing exclaimed. It can't be that the battle is still going on, someone said shakily. This was too terrifying. Any single hill of monsters consisted of numbers that could kill a first-tier heavenly venerate under ordinary circumstances, and here, with suppression from the dimension, these pseudo-heavenly venerates could bury even a second-tier heavenly venerate. Yet now, there were countless hills, and they were all piled up by Ling Han and the Empress with their kills. How could this be believed? They advanced forwards, walking past one hill after another, and shuddering at the sight. It was probable that the number of monsters killed by Ling Han and the Empress together would be more than all of theirs added together. They walked another few steps forwards, and there they saw a scene that they would never forget. Ling Han was standing alone above a pile of corpses, and several hundred monsters were still surging towards him from various directions. However, he would kill each one that approached, with no exception. That figure that stood upright was like a great mountain that would never collapse. In just a few breaths' time, all the monsters were eliminated, and only Ling Han was left, standing proud and high, and looking down on everything below him, invincible and mighty. Everyone was captivated. Whoosh. Still, Ling Han plopped down, sitting down. After battling intensely and consecutively for close to 50 days, even he had reached his limits. The power inside his body was only a slight trickle, and he was filled with weariness. The intensity of this kind of battle was so great that even a freak like Ling Han was strained. Ling Han! Ling Han! Ling Han! Below him, everyone was calling out, looking at him as if they were worshipping a god. This was a cripple. Chapter 2775, 2775 Taking a Step Forwards. Chapter 2775, 2775 Taking a Step Forwards. The war ended. In this single battle, the number of Hysteria's troops that had been killed amounted to as great a number as 30 million, and about half of this number had died by Ling Han's hand. This kind of battle merit was definitely enough to get Ling Han the #1 spot on the general leaderboard. This had never happened before, and would probably never happen again. No one had killed so many pseudo-heavenly venerates in a single battle, though there had also been quite a number of 9th heaven celestial kings among them. When the news came out, even the 8th level was shaken. Who could have expected that a cripple would be able to accomplish such a glorious feat? Cripple, cripple your sister. Everyone was rueful. Ling Han had really put on a great act. He could be called the king of showing off. But even more people knew that there were not many people that could manage such a feat. There were more than 10 million pseudo-heavenly venerates, and under normal circumstances, this was probably enough to exhaust a third tier to death. Furthermore, there was suppression of cultivation levels here. To say nothing of third tier, even a fourth tier or fifth tier could possibly be killed. This kind of battle merit. Even if it was a seventh tier heavenly venerate, could he accomplish this? After this battle, Ling Han's fame immediately skyrocketed. Not only had he returned to the height he had been at during the Battle of Titans, this had even far surpassed then. After the battle, reconstruction of the city defense quickly began. Ling Han and the others also returned here. Because there was no idea when Hysteria's armies would make a comeback, everyone had to help with the repair works on the city wall, and even in such a busy state, there was still a continuous flow of people who came to pay Ling Han a visit. Big Brother Ling, thank you for repaying our misdeeds with benevolence and saving us. After a few young people came over, they knelt in front of Ling Han, their expressions filled with guilt. These were the people that had previously mocked Ling Han. They had not expected that it would be Ling Han that would save their lives. Afterwards, when they found out about Ling Han's majestic feat, they naturally were numb with excitement. This was a true hero. Even if he was slandered by others, he would still firmly uphold his ideals. Big Brother Ling. Big Brother Ling. More and more people came, and they all called Ling Han Big Brother, whether they were really older or younger than Ling Han. In their eyes, he was a shining god, worthy of their respect and worship. This battle cemented Ling Han's unique status. From a certain aspect, he could even be considered an equal of a big shot like a 7th tier heavenly venerate. Zhu Yang came as well. He sighed, and said, previously, when I advanced into the heavenly venerable tier, I thought that I had finally surpassed you. I had not imagined that even if you are only a pseudo-heavenly venerate, you will still be suppressing me firmly. At times, I feel very defiant. Why is there a freak like you in this world to suppress me? But now, I feel fortunate. Thankfully, there is a freak like you, only then will it be possible for this war to end. Ending with our victory. Ling Han laughed loudly, and patted Zhu Yang's shoulder. We will win, he said very confidently. Zhu Yang nodded. Ling Han did not take part in the construction works for the city defense. Everyone knew that he was greatly exhausted, so they naturally wanted him to take a good rest. Furthermore, Ling Han's contribution and the credit that he had attained were already unprecedented. If this defense line of theirs had been conquered, it would not only have been the first spatial level that would have lost a great amount of territory. With a chain reaction, the other 7 levels would have suffered the same fate as well. Hence, Ling Han's credit was astonishingly huge. However, he was not concerned at all. To him, fame did not have the slightest significance. What he desired was an improvement to his strength. Ling Han began his seclusion, and so did the Empress. In truth, after an intense life-and-death battle, this would be a chance to improve their strength or even a trigger to break through into the next cultivation level for many people. Ling Han planned to break through to the heavenly venerable tier. Originally, he had felt that his foundations had not been strengthened enough, but that last battle had really squeezed out all his potential, and also allowed him to unleash his full battle prowess, and he had a completely clear view of his own condition. It's enough now, he told himself. For Ling Han, breaking through to the heavenly venerable tier was a piece of cake because his power came from himself. What he needed to do was to release the binds of his cultivation level. Boom! Every single cell in his body was trembling, unleashing frightening power, but this time, it was not flowing through and tempering his body. Instead, it began to accumulate in his meridians, boosting his battle prowess. Ling Han released a battle cry, and darted into the skies. Wang! A unique energy surged in the heaven and earth, fusing with him. It was extremely vast and majestic. This was that unique power of the flaming frost realm, and he could completely feel the majesty of this dimension. Ling Han felt that if he were to face off against this power now, he would be instantly crushed into dust and die because this was the power of a transcendent dimension. It had to be a 6th-tier heavenly venerate, at the very least, that would be able to stand against this force. Yet Ling Han was confident that the power that he had extracted from the flaming frost realm inside his body could also develop to this extent when his cultivation level increased. Upon deeper thought, this was extremely terrifying. Just a single power inside his body was capable of matching the great power of an entire dimension, and how many such powers were there inside his body? Every single one of them could evolve and improve, and this was the basis of Ling Han's confidence. Indeed, the 6 fundamental powers of the Genesis world were superior to everything else in terms of level, but they could not hold up to the great number of dimensions there were. However, I naturally would not give up on the fundamental powers. On the contrary, only with the inclusion of the 6 fundamental powers would the power of dimension sprout, grow, and flourish well. They will act as a supplement. Ling Han extracted the power of heaven and earth, and with the power that was gushing inside his body, he threw out a punch. Boom! Even the heaven and earth was echoing boomingly, and a black hole had been ripped open at the horizon. Vaguely, countless tentacles flicking around could be seen. Ling Han hurriedly closed up this black hole of space. It was Hysteria's world in the void. It could traverse the void and extend a tentacle into any dimension, provided a lamp was lit to guide its way. Ling Han's previous action was the move to light the lamp, and he naturally had to stop immediately. Clang! Lightning flashed in the heaven and earth, blasting towards him. Heavenly venerates were envied by the heaven and earth. Even if it was useless, a heavenly tribulation would still descend. This was an indication of the attitude of the heaven and earth. Ling Han stood solemnly, and allowed the heaven and earth to blast him. He cast his sight inwards. Within his mind, an incomplete seal had appeared. This seal was a little like the characters that had appeared when the divine demon sword had upgraded, but there seemed to be some difference. Ling Han had no one he could ask now, so he could only keep this question in mind. He ignored the heavenly tribulation, and just proceeded with studying the seal. This seal had only appeared when he had broken through to the heavenly venerable tier, so it should be very significant. He attempted to absorb the power in the heaven and earth, and this seal instantly glowed, speeding up his rate of absorption of the power of heaven and earth by more than a dozen times over. Its effect was the same compared to the seal that had appeared on the divine demon sword. Ling Han then channeled the previous seals, and these seals glowed together. Suddenly, the rate of his absorption of the power of heaven and earth became as much as 32 times higher. The more seals there were, the more rapid the speed of absorbing the power of heaven and earth. After the heavenly tribulation disappeared, Ling Han immediately discovered that the power of heaven and earth had become incredibly weak, seeming a little vague. Just barely, it could be used for cultivation, but it was completely impossible to extract it for use in battle. This was the suppression that had been created after 2 great dimensions had clashed together. If he did not want to endure such suppression, he would have to go to the 2nd spatial level. For the moment, Ling Han was in no rush to go to the 2nd level. He first found the Empress, and asked her if she had suddenly discovered an incomplete seal when she had experienced her breakthrough. However, the Empress shook her head, and said she had not. Chapter 2776, 2776 Heavenly Venerable Seals. Chapter 2776, 2776 Heavenly Venerable Seals. 2776 Heavenly Venerable Seals. Strange. Why didn't the Empress have it? Ling Han then sought out Zhu Yang. An incomplete seal? Zhu Yang was taken aback for a moment, and then inhaled sharply. Brother Ling, you are truly heaven-defying. What do you mean? Ling Han was startled and confused by his reaction. Do you know what is the very most valuable entity for a heavenly venerate? Instead of answering him, Zhu Yang posed another question. What? Ling Han asked. Could it be these seals? Zhu Yang nodded. The more heavenly venerable seals you have mastered, the faster your rate of cultivation would be, because this is actually a bridge or channel to communicate with the power of heaven and earth. The more channels you have, the more your gains will naturally be. He was startled, and then began to inhale sharply. Brother Ling, you said these seals? Hiss, could it be that aside from this seal, you have also mastered other seals? Ling Han did not hide it from him, and said, I have a heavenly venerate tool. When it attained Tao, a seal once appeared. You are truly lucky. Zhu Yang was extremely rueful. Ordinarily, the heavenly venerable seals that we can obtain are obtained through our heavenly venerate tool, but the seal that is obtained in this manner is the same for everyone because this is the final step that is taken after devouring metal has absorbed a sufficient amount of divine metal. Ling Han nodded. The path of advancement for devouring metal was similar, just like how every single disciple in the same sect would be cultivating the same cultivation technique. Hence, it is said that there are a total of 7 heavenly venerable seals, and this much is also mastered by the majority of heavenly venerates. However, some freakish heavenly venerates can discover even more heavenly venerable seals through their extensive periods of cultivation, Zhu Yang said. However, this can only be done by a 3rd-tier heavenly venerate at least. A case like Brother Ling, when it would appear by itself upon your breakthrough to the heavenly venerable tier, is practically inconceivable. Zhu Yang was filled with envy. This heavenly venerable seal that he had comprehended by himself was what was most suitable to one, and would have the strongest effect of improvement. Furthermore, heavenly venerable seals can also be used in battle, condensing the power of heaven and earth, and the might unleashed, would definitely be shocking. Ling Han gave an "oh." Why had he been unable to use those seals in battle before, then? That was because he had still not been a heavenly venerate yet, and could not truly draw and use the power of heaven and earth. Brother Ling, the heavenly venerable seals have incredibly great implications. For any heavenly venerate, they could be considered to be filled with temptation. Thus, you must firmly guard this secret, or even if you have accomplished massive credits for the Genesis world, there may still be people who would scheme against you, Zhu Yang warned solemnly. Ling Han was surprised. Could it be that these heavenly venerable seals can actually be extracted? Zhu Yang nodded. In an encounter with a higher-tier heavenly venerate, they could refine you forcefully, and there is some chance that they could extract that heavenly venerable seal from you. Brother Zhu wouldn't be tempted as well? Ling Han joked. Zhu Yang nodded. To be honest with you, I am truly tempted, but I have not lost all reason to actually harm a hero. Moreover, I am no match for you. Ling Han laughed loudly. This guy was actually quite interesting. Brother Zhu, thank you. Zhu Yang nodded. Don't worry. I will not leak out your secret. I trust you. Ling Han returned to his quarters, and told the Empress about what he had found out about the heavenly venerable seals. Why was it when the two of them condensed the power of dimension of various dimensions, no heavenly venerable seals were formed when the Empress broke through? There are 2 possible reasons. Firstly, the power of dimension that you have condensed is not enough, and secondly, your battle prowess has not reached that level yet, Ling Han deduced. Zhu Yang said that it would have to be a 3rd-tier heavenly venerate, at least, that can possibly discover it. Your battle prowess is only at the 2nd tier, but I have reached the 3rd tier. This may be the reason. The Empress nodded. Then she'd just wait and see. When she advanced to the 2nd tier, her battle prowess would definitely be able to match a 3rd-tier heavenly venerates. At that time, she would see if a heavenly venerable seal would appear automatically. Ling Han made a comparison. He casually dismissed the heavenly venerable seal that was obtained from the divine demon sword, and the efficiency of his extraction of the power of heaven and earth declined to around 25 times, but when he dismissed the heavenly venerable seal that he had just mastered, the efficiency rate dropped to 11 times. The gap was incredibly apparent. Indeed, what was suited to him was what would truly be the most useful. But this did not affect the value of heavenly venerable seals. As long as there were enough of them, the rate of cultivation could be raised to 100, 1,000, or 10,000 times. Could it be that the reason why Xin Chihu and Lin Yolian could cultivate so quickly is because they have mastered a considerable number of heavenly venerable seals? Ling Han murmured. Then if I want to surpass them, I will need to master even more heavenly venerable seals. At present, his rate of cultivation was not much affected by heavenly venerable seals, because he was only a 1st-tier heavenly venerate. He could extract power from the heaven and earth, but it still mostly came from himself. However, after he reached second tier, what he would be cultivating would be the fundamental power of the Genesis world, and that could only be sped up by heavenly venerable seals. Let's go to the second spatial level. Linghan decided to leave. He and the Empress would still have to be suppressed by the heaven and earth here. Not only would it affect their battle prowess, it would also affect their rate of cultivation. The Empress naturally had no objections. Bewitching Maiden Ru also decided to go with them. Thus, the three of them proceeded to inform the celestial administration, and then went to the second spatial level. When a higher tier heavenly venerate went to a lower spatial level, they would be targeted by the heaven and earth there, but they would not if it was the other way round. Thus, the second spatial level actually did not just contain first-tier heavenly venerates. There were also pseudo-heavenly venerates and ninth heaven celestial kings, though their numbers were smaller. There were some ninth heaven celestial kings that were just training here, and they could be considered to be extremely bold and fearless in the face of death. There were some that were the followers of heavenly venerates. Wherever their master went, they naturally would follow. Who knew, they, too, might be able to advance to the heavenly venerable tier. After some consideration, Ling Feifen also took his wife with him into the second level. Both his old man and his old man's old man were there, so it was safe and reliable. Ling Han and company went to report to the celestial administration here first, and they were each given simple and crude accommodations. When they found out that Ling Han had come here, Ji Wuming, Hua Furong, and the others all came to visit him. "You rascal, you had been pretending to be a cripple previously. I had not expected that you would accomplish a battle merit that had never been seen before in the next instant." Everyone was smilingly saying that Ling Han was a great actor, making them feel rueful for a considerable amount of time. Unexpectedly, it was all just an act. Ling Han laughed loudly, and apologized repeatedly. And when the great hero of the first spatial level came here, it also caused a great commotion on the second level. The majority expressed their admiration for Ling Han, but it also caused some people to feel jealous. Originally, they had been the most outstanding characters of this second level, yet now their limelight had been snatched by a rookie, so how could they reconcile themselves to this fact? In a low-level dimension, anyone who could become a heavenly venerate had experienced being tempered for several epochs, and had a stable mental state, but this was the Flaming Frost realm. Everyone's speed of cultivation here was much faster, especially so for those super geniuses. For example, both Xin Chihu and Lin Yolian had become heavenly venerates in only several 100 million years, so would their mental states be very steady? Perhaps. There were some that could maintain their composure, but even more had succeeded at a young age, and had the common failing that all young people had, arrogance. Thus, it was very ordinary that there would be people who would become jealous of Ling Han. Ling Han could not be bothered by these things. All he wanted now was to increase his cultivation level. He could cultivate well here. He manifested the heavenly venerable seal in his mind, and extracted the power of heaven and earth to continuously temper himself. Chapter 2777, 2777 Daily Life. Chapter 2777, 2777 Daily Life. 2777 Daily Life. The peaceful life didn't last long. Only 1 month later, the army of Hysteria attacked. The alarm sounded, and Ling Han immediately mobilized. Same as with the first spatial level, some people were guarding the city wall, while others were behind the city wall. Most of the people had taken out heavenly venerate tools, and looked like they were ready to go all out. Ling Han couldn't help feeling rueful about the fact that there were so many heavenly venerates. At a glance, there were at least tens of thousands. These were all heavenly venerates, and definitely not cheap cabbages. Upon further thought, almost all the heavenly venerates of the whole Genesis world were gathered here, so it wasn't unusual for the number to reach tens of thousands. Despite his thoughts, seeing so many heavenly venerates all of a sudden still gave rise to a dreamlike feeling for Ling Han. Boom! The ground trembled. The army of Hysteria was already assaulting. There were those who ran on the ground and those who flew in the sky. Hysteria was somewhat creative, its creations were bizarre. However, there was a common characteristic. There were many of them. There were some with many feet, some with many eyes, and some with many heads. They were extremely bizarre. However, when these monsters were close enough, the city defense still hadn't been activated. There was no light wave going shoo, 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 and being shot out to first kill a batch of monsters. From the second spatial level onwards, the city defense would just be a defense. Ling Zhenxue stood beside him, explaining to his father. The city defense cannot unleash the battle prowess of a first-tier heavenly venerate, so the focus is on withstanding enemy attacks. The gate there will be opened to let some monsters enter the city, while we will create a pocket of encirclement to destroy them at the first instance. Ling Han nodded. There were only tens of thousands of heavenly venerates here, but looking at the number of monsters all over the mountains and plains, there were at least about 500,000 to 600,000, right? If an intense battle was fought in an open terrain, it might not result in an absolute defeat, but even if it was a victory, it would only be a narrow one. As far as Hysteria was concerned, how long would it take to recreate a large army? Therefore, one couldn't fight recklessly without thinking. Just as Ling Zhenxue spoke, Hysteria's army had begun attacking the city. Peng, an enormous 18-eyed giant, waved its arms and hurled a huge stone slab, which it attached Heavenly Venerable Tier power to. Peng, the stone hit the city wall, causing a crack in it. This was fine, but there were still many 18-eyed giants such as this, and they threw stones one after another, trying to smash the city defense to bits. Of course, there were countermeasures prepared by the Flaming Frost Realm. There were several elites on the city wall who drew their bows and shot out a series of godly arrows. Some smashed the stones to bits, while some barraged the 18-eyed giants. On the other side, Hysteria's main troops were also pouring out from the intentionally opened gap in the city wall, yet only a portion of them could enter, which instantly rendered their advantage in numbers non-existent. Kill. The people here were all extremely practiced, and they immediately went to kill the enemy commanders. They had to end the battle as soon as possible, otherwise, when the influx of Hysteria's army reached a certain level, their advantageous situation would instantly become disadvantageous. Almost one-third of the heavenly venerates here possessed heavenly venerate tools, while none of the monsters in the army was equipped. This, too, ought to be related to Hysteria's ability of creation. After all, there was only so much divine metal and devouring metal in one dimension. Given the advantage in numbers, coupled with the power exhibited by the heavenly venerate tools, a massacre immediately unfolded at the gap in the city wall as batches of Hysteria's troops fell. However, each of Hysteria's fighters was intrepid and fearless in the face of death, rushing forward one after another, and soon caused casualties for the Flaming Frost Realm. Hysteria could afford for heavenly venerates to die, but the Flaming Frost Realm really couldn't afford the same. Generally speaking, it would take at least an epoch to nurture a heavenly venerate. Therefore, it would be a huge loss if one fell. With a loud battle cry, Ling Han swung his sword, leaped down, and unleashed a massacre. Now he was getting more familiar with controlling his power, and slashing out with his sword once was just enough to kill the enemy without wasting any power. The other heavenly venerates were also showing their power. Someone smashed out with a hammer, and a silver light flashed. A seal could just vaguely be glimpsed, but was completely indistinct. Peng, at the smash of the hammer, silver lightning spread out, and a dozen monsters were instantly sent flying, their entire bodies covered by flashing silver light. They fell into a paralyzed state, and were then struck by the heavenly venerates behind them, who instantly killed them in a clean sweep. Here, greater emphasis was placed on cooperation. Ling Han nodded inwardly. He asked the Empress and Ling Zhenxue to follow behind him, while he acted as the spearhead, charging forward all the way. He brandished the divine demon sword, sweeping everything in front of him. The Empress also raised a heavenly venerable seal in her palm, and delivered a blast. Boom, her battle prowess increased by at least 10 times, and simultaneously caused dozens of nearby monsters to be sent flying, turning into a bloody foam while they were still in midair. It had to be known that although she was a first-tier heavenly venerate, she had the battle prowess of a second-tier heavenly venerate, so her destructive power was of course terrifying. Ling Zhenxue's battle prowess was much inferior. He was merely an average first-tier heavenly venerate. He had neither a heavenly venerate tool nor any heavenly venerable seals. He hadn't even learned any heavenly venerate technique, so his battle prowess could only be considered ordinary. Ling Han couldn't help but feel guilty inwardly. He would definitely teach his son a heavenly venerate technique in the future, but the acquisition of devouring metal would depend on luck. It wasn't something one could obtain as one desired. As for heavenly venerable seals, one could only come across them by chance. Fortunately, the assault this time wasn't that fierce. After only 7 days, the fighting subsided. No one spoke of celebration or the like. Everyone immediately proceeded to rest, repair the city wall, and then bury their comrades. Here there was also a leaderboard of battle merits, and the rules were exactly the same. One was the general leaderboard, while the other was the recent leaderboard, and the time to update was also once every 1,000 years. The last update was 7 years ago, so it was still way too early until the next update. Ling Han called his son over, and taught the 5 elements lightning technique and the 9 transformations divine scroll to him. These two were relatively easy to cultivate. Of course, the indestructible heaven scroll had also been taught to Ling Zhenxue, but it would require a lot of material support, so cultivating it was going to be much slower. After the end of a battle, everyone hastened to cultivate and strive for an early breakthrough. If they could defeat Hysteria in the 8th layer of space, they would be able to get rid of the scourge once and for all. There were still some people who went out to hunt the scattered monsters. These monsters feared no death when they were first created, but they also had no intelligence at all. However, they were heavenly venerates, after all, and if they were to remain in this space long enough, they would quickly start to develop intelligence. Once they did, it would be too difficult to kill this kind of heavenly venerate. If one party insisted on escaping, they could not be stopped at all without the other party having an advantage in numbers. Therefore, they had to be eliminated as soon as possible. A very long time ago, everyone had ignored these wandering soldiers. As a result, their numbers had increased after a few years, and they had joined forces to attack the city, causing horrific damage. After learning this lesson, everyone would set out to wipe out these wandering soldiers lest they became a threat every time the battle ended. Ling Han also planned on setting out as he had always believed that fighting was the fastest way to improve one's cultivation level. Ling Han. Before he could set off, he saw a young heavenly venerate approaching with a smile on his face. "Are you heading out of the city to hunt those monsters? Let's go together and take care of each other." Ling Han cast a glance at the other party. At this moment, he didn't know if the other party really wanted to go together with him, or if there was some ulterior motive. He thought for a while, and then smiled. "Okay. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,